come into being, creatures come into being. From rain is the birth of food, and from sacrifice, rain comes into being, and sacrifice is born of work. So this is a really interesting verse. And in this sort of 14th, 15th, and 16th verses, Sri Krishna is introducing a really beautiful concept to us through Arjun. And it's basically a concept that the circle, of the circle of life in this world. The world is actually a system where all these creatures, come from food. Food is coming from rain, and rain is coming from sacrifice, and sacrifice is coming from work. So if you imagine it's like the circle with arrows going between the four different elements. So I'll just say that again. Creatures or humans come from food. Food comes from rain. Rain comes from sacrifice, and sacrifice comes from work. In the Upanishads, there's a mantra which says, Anat bhavati bhutani anati vakalaye bhutani jayante aneta tatani jivanti anat purushaha. And that means that all creatures come from food, all people are born from food, and they all live because of food. This is really true, because what would we do, without sort of bread and butter? We need to eat. How would we be able to last? It's fundamental for us. It's very important. And this is sort of straightforward. We all know that this, that our bodies need food to live. So it might make us wonder, why do we need to even consider this? It's a natural, obvious statement. But Sri Krishna is trying to sort of remind us of this there's a comment in the Upanishads which states that creatures are only born because of food, and food has such a big impact on our bodies, and therefore we shouldn't criticize food. This is quite sort of interesting. So the food that we eat impacts our body, and the body impacts our manners, and so that impacts our thoughts, and that also then sort of impacts our individual soul. So everyone has heard the sentence, "You are what you eat." So this is quite an obvious example. And there's quite an interesting example that Guruji's given us from the scriptures. There was basically a son. It's a story about a Brahmin. A Brahmin son was studying at a rishi's hermitage, and he was on his way home, sort of on a vacation, on a break. And halfway through the journey, it became night time, and he arrived in a town. And it was quite late, and he saw lots of ladies were living, old ladies were living in the different houses. So he knocked on the first door, and an elderly woman opened the door. And this was a student of only 12 or 13 years, and he asked if he could stay there the night. And he did say, I don't need to sleep in the house, I can just sleep on the front of the porch if that's okay with you. So the elderly woman had a lot of sympathy for him, because she said, this is the son of a Brahmin who's come to my house, he's just come from a hermitage, she said, please come and sleep in the house. And, the son of the Brahmin said, I won't be comfortable sleeping in the house, it's absolutely fine, I can sleep outside. And he started to get out his handkerchief to clean the front porch so that then he could lie there. The lady sort of said, the old lady said, I live alone and it's really no problem. I've got comfortable pillows and blankets, come into the house. If you don't sleep on that bed, then no one else will. So she gave the bed to him with a lot of love and affection and genuine feelings. And she was thinking, this is a Brahmin son, I'm welcoming him into my house. And the boy went to sleep, and he was really tired, but he had a habit of waking up early to do his prayers. So he woke up at 4 o'clock, and because he was the Brahmin son, he had to sort of do his prayers, and he went to a river just outside of the town. But as soon as he got up, he started to think, that bed was so comfortable, so much more comfortable than the bed I've got in my house. The elderly woman's given this to me, but she's fast asleep. No one's going to notice, if I take it away with me. So he took the bed, wrapped it around in a circle, put the blankets and the pillows inside, and he ran off with it. And he tried to go as far away as he possibly could. And then he was running for such a long time, and then he stopped after about an hour and a half, and it was about 6 o'clock at that point. And he thought, what am I doing? This lady's given me this bed, and she's been so genuine. And he got really tired suddenly and put the bed down and started doing his prayers and started doing the Gayatri mantra. And he suddenly realized that he just couldn't take this bed away with him, that he should give it back. It didn't belong to him. And he also then realized that he would accept punishment for what he'd just done. And he would tell everybody in the town that he'd had this thought of stealing the bed. Although he didn't go through with it, he did have the thought. So he was going to tell everyone in the town that he was a thief. So he put the bed back over his shoulder and went back towards the town. And the sun had risen, and the woman was awake. And she came out of her room and saw that the boy had gone, and also that the bed had gone. There was no bed, no blanket, no pillows, nothing. But the thought came into this woman's mind that, he probably took, the bed away so that no one else would steal it. And it just shows that basically this lady was so innocent and that she only had pure thoughts and only good thoughts. And often this is the case, that someone can't see bad things in other people, and it's, this lady was just like that. And then she started thinking, gosh, I didn't even wake up early. I've got a guest in my house. I've got a Brahmin son here, and my mum says all the time, someone comes to your house, you go to sleep after they go to sleep and you wake up before they do so they can have, they feel comfortable and they feel welcome in your house. And she was thinking, how can I have gotten up before this child, he's already left the house. And he must be, when he comes back, he must be hungry. So she starts to prepare a wonderful meal for him. And the boy slowly comes back, and as soon as he comes back to the village, he tells everybody, as he'd promised to himself, that he was a thief and he'd taken this bed. And this lady had put so much faith in him, but he'd run away with it. And then she went back to the lady's house, and he'd said to everyone in the village, I think you should hit me because I've done something that's wrong. And the lady noticed that all of this was happening, and she stopped and she said, everyone go away, and she welcomed the boy into the house. And then she said, sit down, have a seat, and they started talking, and the boy had tears in his eyes and was really emotional. And the woman said to the boy, you're a Brahmin's son, and you've just gone to study at this hermitage, and yet you had this thought of stealing the bed. How is this possible? What's the reason for this? What did you eat yesterday? Now, that was the key question, she said. She asked him, what is it that you ate? And the boy said, Mother, what I did yesterday when I left the Rishi's hermitage is I found a restaurant on the way home, and I ate there. And the tears came into this woman's eyes, and she said, I now know the reason. I understand why this thought came to your mind, because the restaurant that you went to is a restaurant which is being sort of run by immoral donations from a businessman with bad morals and who's not doing the right thing. And this is therefore the reason why this bad thought's come to you, because it's come through the food. So basically, whatever you put into your body will come out, whether it's in thoughts or actions. And food has a lot of impact on the body, and on our lives, from simple things. I mean, we've all experienced this. We all have a body we know. And, I'm guilty of this. I just eat whatever I want, whenever I want, and I don't discriminate. But it makes such a big difference, because if you actually take a practical example of this, and perhaps for 3 months don't eat in any restaurants and eat at home, don't eat any catered food, you'll see that your whole body will be cleansed. And, a lot of people treat their bodies like, their stomachs like garbage bins, just throw in whatever. I mean, your whole body then sort of is harbouring all these different things that you're getting from all these different places. But if you go to the house of someone that you know, or you go home and eat something that's been cooked by your parents, with love, you feel a different feeling when you eat that food. And, people always say, "Ma ka khana" is just completely different to anybody else's food. Because the vibrations of what that person is doing when they're cooking the food is the vibrations that they are thinking about when they're cooking that food is completely different. And you feel the difference when you eat it. So, Guruji's given an example that, two people might go to the same supermarket and pick up groceries, but the way in which that food is cooked and the impact that it will have on other people will be completely different. The body is made from food, and thoughts are made from food. So, as I said earlier, things like organs, your blood and health are affected by food. But this isn't a nutrition lesson, so I won't go into all of that stuff. But one of the main sentences is, the first line is Anad Bhavanti Bhutani. So Bhutani doesn't necessarily mean the bodies of animals, but it's their thoughts and their mindsets and all the things that come into us. So we aren't just our bodies, as Drew's told us many times, we're not just our bodies, we're also our thoughts and the soul. So the thoughts are made from food. And we then consider, how is food made? So the Taittiriya Upanishad says, Anam na nindya, which means don't criticize food. Now, this is quite interesting, because a lot of people have the habit of criticising food, and I think because we've got MasterChef and things like that on TV, people have become even worse. But, people will go out to a restaurant and they'll say, there's too much water in this dal, there's too much oil in this curry. You go to a wedding somewhere and people will always be like analysing the food, and they'll say the chapati's too thick and the rice is stuck together, but they keep complaining while they're eating, but yet they're still eating. And I'm sure some of you guys will have observed this somewhere. If someone's eating 4 chapatis or 5 chapatis, even if they're saying, this is too thick, this is not too good, they'll still be eating 5 chapatis. It doesn't make a difference to them. And, that sort of person just can't eat without complaining. And we should not really criticise food, and I'll go into this in a moment as to why. One of, Guruji's spoken about something which is really interesting, and he says 40% of fights start at the dining table. That's quite interesting because, often husband and wife will have dinner, and that's the time when they start arguing. the husband will complain, oh, there's not enough salt in this, or you don't know how to cook this right, or something or another. And that's 40% of fight. That's quite a big percentage. If the food's too sweet, it doesn't really matter, because you're not going to die if you continue to eat that food and it's still sweet. If you don't like it, don't eat it, but don't necessarily give out what Guruji calls certificates every time you eat. So don't compliment it either, because if you always say, oh, this is great, and then one time you don't say it's great, then the other person is going to think, oh, they don't particularly like it, and they'll take it as a complaint. Basically, if you then try to do a happy medium, which means you don't complain about your food and you don't compliment your food, then perhaps it's better not to speak about the food, and that's the advice that Guruji's giving us. But he's then saying that if we don't, if we can't go without talking whilst having food, talk about something completely different and don't talk about just food. And he's seen plenty of examples. I've seen this a lot. I'm sure you all have as well. That you sit down and then everyone analyses every single tiny piece about the food, and then the whole meal goes on, and that's the only thing that people talk about. And, if you, in the same way in which you're able to compliment it, you might also be able to criticise it. So there's a sentence in the Upanishad which basically says that food is Brahman, so Anam Brahman, that means food is life. Everything comes from the food that we eat, and therefore we shouldn't criticise the food that we're eating, because if you think about it, that's what you're taking into your body, and therefore you're criticising it. Now, the next one of the next word is Parjanyad on the second line, and that says that's the meaning of rain. And Sri Krishna is going to go on and explain the 3 different meanings of rain. So food comes from rain. Now, what exactly is Parjanya? In the Mahanarayan Upanishad, they say, Parjanya na oshave vanaspateva prajayante. And this means that plants and medicines are formed from rain. The word rain can actually have 3 meanings. The first one is that which is satiated, and it comes for people's insides. So rain does a lot of good. We're at the moment now it's raining, but we're, supposed to be in drought at the moment, and a lot of farms are suffering, and rain does a lot of good. Rain doesn't necessarily just come for itself, it comes for everyone else. It might not feel like that when it's raining and, we're getting soaked, but it does come for the benefit of plants. If you think about it, when something falls, people always criticise it, snow, or if something drops, they say, oh, that's not a good thing. But rain falls for the benefit, and most of the time, this is seen as a beautiful thing. It's something that is praised. The rain actually doesn't fall for itself, but it falls for the world, and that's where we get our food from. So that's the first meaning, that which is satiated. And the second meaning is something which showers down juice. So there's 3 really nice words in the Sanskrit language which we'll go on to talk about. The first one is arjan, the second one is uparjan, and the third one is parjanya. Arjan means to earn, which we know when we were looking at the definition of arjan earlier. And then the second word is uparjan. Now this is different to arjan, because arjan is when someone goes from having 0 to, say, £1 million. And that's sort of you're earning. But uparjan is the increasing in profits. So where one person will achieve something after taking over a business from their ancestors. So, for example, your father may have left a shop worth £10,000, and then you from that may have opened up another shop and then converted that £10,000 to £20,000. And that's an example of increasing, and that's considered to be uparjan. The third meaning is parjanya, and that's when there's sort of the concept or the inclination of charity. So, again, talking about rain falling for the benefit of our food and what we eat. Niruktama has given an explanation of parjanya as paraya janati iti parjanya, and that means one who gives to people what they need. So everything that we have in this world in terms of food is a result of rain. Now, the third meaning is Yagnat Pavati Parjanyo, which means that rain happens because of sacrifice, which is something that we've been talking about through the last few chapters. And in the Manusmriti, and with sort of a small variation in the Mahabharata, there's a really beautiful verse which answers our question about how rain can actually come from sacrifice. Agna, and what the line goes like this: Agnahu apasta te samyak avidya mupastate aditya jayate vrushti vrushte anam tata vraja. And this means that good worship, good oblations that we offer to the sacrifice go to the sun. The rain comes from the sun, and scientists have proven this, that solar cosmic rays from the sun cause clouds to form, and therefore without the sun there can't be any clouds. And food comes from rain, and people are formed from this rain, by this rain. And this verse is actually in the Manusmriti and also in the Mahabharata. And in Srimad Adi Shankaracharya's commentary of the Gita, he's also quoted this verse. So what I quite like about this is that there's a lot of scientific proof behind this. And, we can consider this from a scientific perspective to see how this works. So in the olden days, people used to say that, you should do a sacrifice if you want some rain. And today's scientists and intellectuals are always asking how this is possible. And they ask how rain can fall if one performs a sacrifice. So the rishis have explained this. Whenever there's a sacrifice, even like a modern sacrifice where you say swaha, swaha, the fire makes the air nearby it warm, and therefore smoke is formed, and the smoke rises upwards, and on the heavy, cool air nearby is then dragged below. So in a sacrifice, a cycle is formed where the thin air rises, the cool air goes underneath, and there's a circulation of air. I mean, I'm sure everyone did this in science when they were a lot younger. So this basically means that this is happening in small sacrifices that we do perhaps, if we do it in our house or if we do it on a large scale. Sometimes if we do it on a very, very small scale, we can't necessarily see the full effect of it. But, in ancient times when they used to do this, they recited the Vedas in sacrifices. And sometimes when they did, say, 108 or 1,080 fires. So they really did see the impact of this. When these created the circulation in the air, the cold air that then came down resulted in rain. And that's why, when it's warm, we always say, it's going to rain soon. We've had that recently. It was hot last week and now it's raining. So it's a fundamental theory of how rain comes from sacrifice. When big wars happened in ancient times, people let off fireworks, and this led to the air nearby becoming warmer. And today, when bombs are let loose, this also leads to the air beside getting warmer. And, I'm sure soldiers have experienced this, that, when sort of even nuclear bombs that are tested today, it often leads to the rain coming straight afterwards, because so much heat is built up that rain naturally then comes. There's another example of forest fires as well. When the trees nearby are scraping against each other, the rain just naturally comes by itself. And it's a physical reaction because there's a variation in temperature. So then when we then consider, when we're doing a sacrifice or we're doing sort of an offering, why do we add ghee and medicines into the sacrifice? And why don't we just burn wood? That's also an option. We can use ghee or we can use wood. Why do we use ghee? The ghee and offerings that we put into the fire actually result in the air nearby becoming pure and better for breathing, and this actually affects one's mind and body. And the purity in the air nearby has actually got a good impact and has a good impact on people's lives, and that's why we offer ghee, and this is why we sort of put it in a sacrifice. There's actually a mantra in the Rig Veda about the water cycle. We all know that water comes from the ocean and it evaporates towards the sun, it creates clouds, and then when it goes cold, it comes down in the form of rain. And if we try to look at this then in like a metaphorical or spiritual meaning, it sort of means that sacrifices lead to people, and when someone performs a sacrifice, the good intention, with good intentions, obviously, because we need good intentions while we perform the sacrifice, then the power, wealth, and good success rains down on him. So it's kind of the same circle we were talking about earlier. So I'll just say that again. That's people, which then leads to sacrifice, and then success will rain down on them. We can see in society that when someone wants to gain wealth and they perform a sacrifice of knowledge, then the wealth often just showers down upon that person. But if you just want to gather money, for example, to open a hospital, then, if you go out with a tin trying to collect money, it's harder to collect money in that way than if you perform a sacrifice when it would actually come just naturally. So the cause for the action is the most important. If the action is done for sacrifice, then success will rain down upon that person. It's actually a matter of faith. So when people ask, does rain actually really come down as a matter of sacrifice? Sacrifice, the answer that Guruji gives us is that faith is really important. When you carry out a sacrifice or you carry out a prayer or anything, it's really important to have faith. The results will only actually come about if the person who's performing the sacrifice has got faith that the results will come. you often have to have faith that good results will come, and therefore the sacrifice is worth it. Otherwise, basically, your sacrifice is useless. I felt like this when I was applying for training contracts, and people kept saying, keep the faith, and the results did come. So there's an example of a story where there was a town in India where there'd been no rain for 5 years, and the people in the town had performed a sacrifice for rain. And the sacrifice went on for 7 long days, and it was meant to finish at about 4 o'clock on Sunday. And the rule was that the whole town was going to stand in a line when the sacrifice had finished to see that, the rain would come. And as soon as the sacrifice finished, someone was sent into the town to invite people to come to the prayers. So when everyone was, when this particular guy called everyone into the town to come for the prayers, one young boy came with an umbrella. And everyone was laughing at him and saying, why on earth have you got an umbrella? Why are you bringing this? And the young boy said, well, we've prayed to God for rain, and therefore it will rain when we come back into the centre of town. And everyone was laughing and saying, oh, it's not necessarily, you don't need to take an umbrella. And the most important thing here is that out of the whole town, the only boy that was actually perhaps worthy of performing this sacrifice, or who had the right to perform the sacrifice, was this young boy, because he truly did believe that the rain would come, and he had real faith. So this is, the important moral of this particular story. Other people's sacrifices were to pray for the rain, but they didn't particularly expect it, and that's a difference. They didn't take their umbrellas with them. They didn't believe that it was going to rain, and this actually means that they didn't have faith in what they were doing. So this 10-year-old boy who had faith, he will actually be successful because he has faith in what he's doing. Faith is really important in any sacrifice that we commit. The next line is yagna karma samudbhava, and that means sacrifice only comes from karma. So if you talk about this in the modern concepts, it makes us think about ecology and environmental balance. And there's so many conversations about this. I'm sure everyone's seen films about what's going to happen in the future with nature. And a lot of Eastern thinkers have sort of considered nature to be their mother. We even have the words Matrubhumi and Mother Nature. And Western thinkers often have treated, we could say that Western thinkers have treated nature as their enemy because they want to win over nature. There's like a battle between the two. And one of Bertrand Russell's books is actually called The Conquest of Nature, so this is just an example. But it would make Eastern thinkers think, well, why would you want to win over nature? Why would you combat nature? And, we regard trees as God. We just talked about rain at length, but we see rain as powerful and as God, and we also see wind as important as well. So if we're seeing the mountains and rivers as God, the Ganga and Yamuna, people consider them to be very important. You can't win over them. And this is the reason why Sri Krishna is saying what he's saying in this particular verse. As soon as man tries to win over nature, it's, the ecological balance is lost, and we see this all the time. We're seeing this everywhere, and a simple example is, in a farm, for example, a snake is seen as a farmer's friend, and we might think, why? I mean, I'm petrified of snakes, but the reason for this is that a snake will eat the mice. So if you try to remove that snake from the farm, then the mice will eat the crops. So actually, the snake is quite, an important part of, has an important role for the farmer. Otherwise, his crops wouldn't grow. So indirectly, the snake is helping. So this is sort of the ecological balance and the circle of life and everything kind of coming together. Everything that's in the world actually has a meaning. And there's a poet called Sagir who has said this very beautiful. Nakama ke burun agar koi sarjane o manav, kare ke sarv sarjan jagma sarjan har samjine. So this actually means God creates things after giving them a lot of thought, and nothing is actually useless in this world. Everyone probably did this in biology as well, but it's the same thing. If you've got a jungle, there's the balance. The Lion King is springing to mind here, but when hunters kill a tiger, there's an increase in the population of deers. So when the populations of deers decreases, there's also a decrease in the population of tigers because they've got nothing to eat. And so this is, again, ecological balance. Nature generally balances everything really well. And in the last 200 years, man has broken this ecological balance. And earlier on, Sri Krishna has explained about the world being a system and nature being a system. So this is something that we should bear in mind, even in our own lives. So we'll move on to verse 15 now.